Elham is Director of Lawyers for Justice in Libya, and of course also very distinguished SOAS alumni, so it's a homecoming for Elham, and you're obviously always more than welcome to join us, especially for this amazing event again. And Elham and Lawyers for Justice in Libya have been the driving force, so it is very appropriate for Elham to introduce you properly to the event and talk you through the program for tonight. Elham, please.
It's a success when I get up the stairs, so that's good. Thank you so much, Lutz, and thank you to the Center for Human Rights Law at SOAS. Lawyers for Justice in Libya was born in SOAS, actually. I remember very, very clearly. But today we're looking at a question that really does impact our work, but more so, it really impacts the transition that Libya is on. The road to peace, which is what we're referencing in this title, is the road to stability, and it's of course never smooth. But in the last 11 years, Libya's future has become more and more in jeopardy because of armed groups, because of the stalemate in the international community, because of the widespread corruption, and because of the overwhelming culture of impunity that's thrived and has been promoted by all actors. To help us unpack this, we're really thrilled to welcome Ambassador Beth Van Schaack, who I had the pleasure of spending the afternoon with. And I really hope that we'll have an opportunity to really get into the nitty-gritty and really to think about what it means when we talk about criminal justice and how it can help pave peace.
So I am indeed the 6th Ambassador at Large for Global Criminal Justice. I'm thrilled that my former boss, number 4, is here as well, Stephen Rapp. I was his deputy under Secretaries Clinton and Kerry, and so I've tried to carry forward so much of the energy and passion and respect for victims and the dignity of all of humankind forward as I've occupied this role now within the U.S. State Department. I was sworn in on March 17th, just after Russia launched, or I should say relaunched, its war of aggression against Ukraine. And so this would have been an enormous job, even without Ukraine, and now it often feels crushing, given the enormous needs for justice around the world, not just in Ukraine, but elsewhere. And so much of the world's eyes are on Ukraine, and yet we know that that's often taking eyes away from other situations that have been demanding justice for many, many years, including within Libya. So it's a time of extraordinary challenges, but also I want to say opportunities, and that's really what I want to focus on today, is do a little bit of a tour du monde of the system of international justice, because it's becoming increasingly interlinked, disaggregated, creative. I wrote a PhD on imagining justice for Syria, and the subtitle was "Water Always Finds Its Way." And in this way, I think justice always finds its way. With any little impediment that you put, it will find cracks, it will find a way downhill, and it will eventually move forward. And I think that's what we're seeing even in places where impunity feels really intractable. Looking a little bit at the situation of Libya, and as I mentioned, I'm not a Libya expert, and so I'm really looking forward to our Q&A. Of course, meaningful justice there has been slow-moving. I guess that's a charitable way of saying it. Non-existent is maybe more accurate. But there are mechanisms happening, and there are efforts happening around documentation. And we know that documentation is the foundation, it's the baseline. There can be very little of any sort of a justice response without accurate information about what has happened. And so that's one area where we try and do consistent funding in order to just ensure that that predicate is available. And then the attention can turn, when the political situation allows it, to thinking about what justice itself might look like. And we continue to believe that resolving the political uncertainty, it's going to be crucial to have justice play a component in that. We have tried to work on the expansion of the fact-finding mission, which has done really incredible work. I commend their reports to you. They're extremely detailed. It's amazing what they've been able to do without full access around the country, without the resources that they need. Unfortunately, the mandate has only been extended for another 9 months, and so this will be one of the final articulations of the fact-finding mission in order to try and, I hope, pull together some observations. They've put together some very cogent recommendations that, if taken on by if not the current government, then a future government following credible elections, would go a long way towards creating space for justice to happen, for victims to bear witness, for individuals to think about what rehabilitation and reconciliation might look like in a particular Libyan context. The FFM, the fact-finding mechanism, has emphasized in all of its reports that whenever it speaks to survivors, to families of victims, they all emphasize the importance of justice, the role that justice must play in any response in a sort of peaceful transition within the country. And that is a consistent messaging that gets heard all around the country. And I think it really lays bare the importance of this work, that when you ask survivors, they have needs, and it includes reparations and livelihood assistance and psychosocial rehabilitation, but they also want that elusive principle of justice. And so that's what we as an international community need to do a better job of providing to individuals.
When we talked about other situations, it was that justice was a prerequisite to stability. When we talked about Libya, it was stability was a prerequisite to justice. And so I wonder whether we can talk about that tension a little bit and see how we can find those paths to the water in Libya, because I don't see stability coming anytime soon. And you know, I think it's important to really think about what avenues there are.
It's sort of that age-old dilemma. And I think probably in each context or society, if you're thinking about it as a kind of a weighing of peace efforts versus instability efforts versus justice efforts, that the balance, the proportions are going to be different, and they may wax and wane over the years. So you can invest and get some outcomes in one, and maybe you sequence responses in the justice side, or vice versa. And that's where I think coming down to this question of documentation is so important, because it lays the groundwork for both. You can pursue that at any time, even in a situation of instability. We've got now the technology and the techniques to be able to do good documentation, even when you can't physically get into the country. And the question of timing, I think, ultimately is for each individual society to decide. Obviously, working with donor states, with partners, with this epistemic community of international justice experts. But that's for the particular societies to decide, and the hope that they can find allies that will help support them when they decide that this is an institution that's worth investing in, or we want to think about how to design this institution. So in the Gambia, for example, they're conceptualizing also a hybrid court, but with ECOSOC, which is, or ECOWAS, which is the sub-regional organization there. What would that look like? Who knows? It's never been done before, but let's work together to bring communities that have had hybrid tribunals to talk about what worked, what didn't work, where things went wrong, how to fix them, how to think about tailoring it to a particular society. And so creating, I think, spaces for communities to talk together and to figure out what's going to be the best model for them. And then hopefully the donor community and others can support those decisions when they're ready to move forward.
Is having worked on Syria for so long, when Ukraine started, I was amongst the minority that was actually kind of excited to be able to do something on the kind of Russian aggression into Ukraine and the crimes, partly because it's a just cause, but partly because I saw where there is political will. Do you see that as an opportunity to cement precedents, like what's happening now, that then we can use for other conflicts, to kind of have something to say, well, you've done that here, why you're not doing it there, rather than saying, okay, I'm not going to get involved for kind of whataboutism reasons?
I actually do think that a rising tide is going to lift all boats. I see the criticism or the concern that all the attention is going to Ukraine, and we're seeing this incredible solidarity and consensus and coordination amongst the European prosecutorial groups under the Eurojust network through the joint investigative team. But it also, I think, is building a kind of a muscle memory around this work that then will make it easier to pursue other cases that might be of and involving and coming from societies that are not, European societies, where you have that kind of it feels like an easier case to understand. It's a very clear, act of aggression by one state against another. It's not a complicated civil war where you've got a fractured opposition and you've got a transnational terrorist organization involved, and all of the challenges that come with prosecuting cases under messier, quote unquote, conflict. It was a real honor to be chosen chosen to give the annual Justice Lecture here. I had a really terrific day today here at SOAS and working with all of the Libyan activists, and the opportunity really to speak to not just students of SOAS, but a number of individuals from Libya itself. The situation in Libya is obviously a really difficult one when it comes to the imperative of justice, and so I appreciated the opportunity to have to start doing some thinking about it, but also to engage in a really rich and inspiring conversation with people who know much more about the situation than I do.